So it's been around a month since Re:Zero's first season has concluded, and I think that's given me enough time to reflect on what I watched, as well as making sure I'm not overhyping anything and to put my overall thoughts into perspective. Re:Zero, to me, is my favorite seasonal show of the year, although Yuri on Ice and surprisingly Hip Whip Girls from the fall season made their statements known very quickly for me also. Now take that as a shot of what I find to be good or bad in a series, but it was certainly one heck of a ride. However, did I find it to be the best show of the year? Well, there's only one way to find out. What's up guys, it's Kent from Spartan Media Reviews, here to review the anime Re:Zero. Re:Zero is what you get when you combine the fantasy narrative of Utawaru Rumano, the darker tone and brutal nature of Berserk, and the time resets of Erased and Steins Gate. To keep summaries short, for those who haven't seen the show yet, Subaru, a NEET, gets transported to a fantasy world for no reason whatsoever. He decides this is his fate, then many twists and turns happen, but not in a positive light for the most part. I just want to make this statement first and then go into what I thought about the series as a whole. Re:Zero is the most fun I've had with a series I watched seasonally since 2014's Parasite the Maxim. I guess you can just play that to my love of thrillers in general, but man did they make it easy for me to keep watching the next episode. Every week I would look forward to what would happen next to Subaru and the rest of the cast, which from a production standpoint is a huge accomplishment. Re:Zero knows how to capture an audience. You want to come back each episode to see what happens next, even if it is from a negative viewpoint. That in itself has to be a positive aspect, which I am sure is something they want to accomplish in the long run, since they are trying to make a profit after all. Now for actual critique. As a whole, I thought that Re:Zero's narrative was perfectly acceptable. Nothing exemplary, but okay as a whole. However, I don't believe that is what makes Re:Zero's story good. Instead, I believe that Re:Zero excels in its use of framing shots, both in general and for emotional scenes, proper use of editing technique, and doing the most with their sound design and animation. I honestly believe episodes like episode 18 and especially 15 are phenomenal and are probably my favorite episodes that I have seen this year, based off the impact alone that they contain. I mean, it was always a treat seeing each episode get better, at least for me personally, which I'm assuming means that the author of the series improved in his writing over the series span. For the most part, I found the overall tone of the series to be pretty great, honestly. While some scenes mostly surrounding the craziness of the battle with a colored mammal seemed a little cheesy at certain points, the majority of the scenes certainly hit home with their tone, at least for me anyways. The time resets, or what they call return by death, were certainly interesting as well, as they can be considered a double-edged sword if you look at them from a certain perspective. However, we can tell that Subaru, after the first couple of times, hates the resets. You can say that the time resets removes all the tension that was once present, which would ruin the story's continuation, but that's not the case for Subaru's character. It's shown in the transformation of his character much to the same way as Okabe from Steins Gate. It's pretty obvious that nobody wants to die against their own will, so why would Subaru want to keep dying over and over again, even if that means the world never becomes reset? It will obviously take an emotional toll on you if you are the only one that remembers everything from before, with even more pain if it's all negative, in Subaru's case. However, there are certainly issues I had that stopped the narrative from being better than good. Personally, I believe that the initial start to the series is slow and a little too generic for my tastes. Subaru's transport to the different world is never explained aside from the "hey, I'm here, might as well stay forever" idea, which seems kind of weird in itself. I guess Subaru couldn't care less where he is, considering he is a NEET and escapism is something he wants in life, but I believe that they could have just put him in the fantasy world and it would have been pretty much the same, which leads to pacing in general. The pacing for this series jumped around a lot in my opinion. At times I felt like the episodes dragged out little details, while at other points they went as fast as they could through them. For a person who watched this weekly, it didn't seem like much of a problem, but if I were to rewatch the series immediately, I'm sure I would find the pacing worse than I believe right now. Then we have the ending, but more specifically the non-concluded plot points. For an open-ended conclusion, I was actually pretty happy with it, considering anime usually fails in this regard. It was beautifully shot and had somewhat of a bittersweet vibe going for it, which made things a little easier to digest in terms of not concluding everything. However, they still did not conclude everything they released, which is a disappointment. I think what made this aspect worse was that they made these narrative points to be a big deal and then they pretty much never go back to them again, in which I am referring to the election. If this aspect was as important as it seemed, I believe that they should put a little more emphasis on it. Granted, with a season 2, the story will probably answer those narrative points, but that certainly doesn't help season 1's case in this regard. Re:Zero's cast has a ton of characters that I love in terms of personality. While yes, most of these characters are quote-unquote otaku bait, they still made their time on screen screen memorable. The main villain of the show was such a blast to watch thanks to his over-exaggerated personality, which to me made things more gripping or entertaining depending on the mood in question. However, aside from Subaru, barely any of the cast advances throughout the show. A majority of the supporting characters fall into what Steins Gate suffered in as well when it comes to their supporting characters. They are on screen for a large majority of the show but never do anything that can transform their character in a positive or negative light. While we see a lot of these supporting characters used as plot devices to make our MC change, they themselves stay the exact same. I think the only exception aside from a few characters in the final couple of episodes was Rem, as she does improve by the end of the series, if only a little. We learn about her backstory and we also see her evolve with Subaru to where we are now. However, even Rem loses the spotlight and becomes non-existent in the final couple of episodes. In short, despite me loving the personalities of this cast, development was needed for these characters to improve, aside from Subaru of course. Honestly, I think Subaru is a great character due to the mindset he is given and that he isn't a general wish fulfillment type of character that is given an advantage every time. I do not believe that you are supposed to like Subaru, as he isn't an immersive type of character, just like you weren't supposed to like Okabe during his time of insanity. He's trying to find himself through all of this suffering, which is one of the main narrative points of the show. You also hate him not because he is a bad character, unless you think that way of course, but because you want him to change. He's like Shinji from Eva, which I'm sure people will hate me in comparing the two, but you hated him because he was weak and cowardly, and you wanted him to change for the better. Both Shinji and Subaru are put into these circumstances where they are pretty much forced against their will to do something they obviously don't want to do, and they either have to adapt or slowly lose their minds, which in the case of both of these characters is the latter. They also both have people around them that want to help ease the pain, but both characters push them away and fall back to their bad habits during many points of the show. However, then both characters accept their shortcomings and try to change things to better everyone. Subaru also doesn't have any positive special abilities that he can pull out of thin air to save the day, but he wants to be the hero. He wants to save everyone and receive the praise from it. It's a significant flaw in his character, but it's done to the best extent. Re:Zero's production quality is pretty good for the most part. I certainly find it to be better than Steins Gate and around the same quality as Akame ga Kill, which I find to be well produced also. While I believe that the framing of shots and editing are the highlight of the production value, the actual movements of characters look quite nice, especially during some fights. I personally also love the character designs, even if they are quote-unquote waifu pandering. The CG is CG, so I don't have much to say on that, but moments of action aside from where there was barely any light in the scene look quite nice. Both openings of the series, when they actually used them, worked really well as a symbolic overview for the entire series, as well as just being visually pleasing in general. The endings fall into this category as well. The first ending is quite pretty in my opinion, even if somewhat simple. It has a beautiful yet chilling vibe going on when you combine something pure like snowfall with blood and menacing shadows. The second ending also has a lot of styles going on at the same time, but I think it works really well with the track it is accompanied by. The soundtrack to Re:Zero is definitely one of the highlights of the entire series. This was certainly one of, if not the most important aspects in capturing the certain scenes I really like. The tracks themselves are all over the place in terms of variety, but they really all worked well with the scene they were put in. Shout out to my favorite tracks, Subaru and the phone ringtone track, which is actually based off another song in a different series. Both of those tracks certainly did their jobs in capturing those iconic moments of the show. In terms of opening and endings, I have a feeling that I'm one of the only people that didn't enjoy listening to either opening of the show. While the animation surrounding them, especially in the first opening, is well produced and very symbolic in a lot of ways, the tracks accompanying them really didn't do anything for me. The first ending is my favorite non-orchestral song in the series, giving off that fantasy vibe that I think works really well with the show's elements, while the second ending is really growing on me as well, mostly because of the remix done by Jun Kuroda, which I probably mispronounced, which I will put in the description as well. The voice direction, particularly surrounding Subaru's actor Yusuke Kobayashi, is fantastic as well. The range given off from his voice along with the rest of the cast is tremendous, making those significant moments hit hard. While it may not be as good as the original, when a dub for this series is produced, which I'm sure will happen in the near future, I have a feeling that it will be pretty great, as long as Subaru gets cast properly. Hashtag Austin Tyndall for Subaru 2016. Now, with everything that I have said, do I recommend watching Re:Zero? Yes, please. Re:Zero to me was one of those series that, despite not having the best narrative or overall cast, is still a great addition to its genre. While yes, you can call it overly generic, otaku pandering, unnecessarily dark and brutal, and so on, there's a reason to why the show works so well with a lot of recycled ideas. Even if I don't believe it to be the best overall show of 2016, the talent behind the show certainly did their jobs very well and made for a fun 25-week ride. Spartan Media Reviews gives Re:Zero a watch it recommendation. If you are one of the few that haven't seen Ray Zero and are interested in checking out the show, you can watch it for free over on Crunchyroll. Now, what are your thoughts on Ray Zero? Comment below. If you enjoyed this review, hit that like button, I would really appreciate it. You can also subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, I would really appreciate that as well. Follow me on Twitter and Hummingbird to keep up to date with the current things that I am doing, and with all that said, I will catch you guys in my next review. Thank you for watching.
だからうつむかない。ここからゼロから始めよう。夏木スバルの物語を。お前の惚れた男が最高にかっこいいヒーローになるんだってところ。ゼロから始める異世界生活を。